This video is a quick look at the suitability of the INEOS Grenadier as a touring four-wheel drive. In order to do a complete review, I'd need to spend a lot of time with the vehicle and take it on extended trips, but this should be useful as an early indication anyway. It's based on my research, my test drive, and also conversations with owners. Now, most of the video is detail of me going over what I found, but there is a summary at the end. So engine bay then. Now we've got this sort of semi-triangular engine bay there, so access is a bit restricted, but that is a good thing in my view because you've got this sort of area here you can put things on, and I know from having owned a Defender how much I valued just this flat area here just as a storage space, and I put the owner's manual on it, as you can see. In fact, it's a hardcover owner's manual. Now there's a few interesting things underneath the engine bay. First of all is that here's the air filter, and you can't clip it off with clips. There's just bolts you've got to undo, which is annoying to say the least. So if you want to give it a quick bash, it's a bit of work with a screwdriver to take that out. Then over here, I'm pretty sure this is the jump start post because the batteries are actually in the center seat, but in the owner's manual it's only got really a definition for a generic jump start. It doesn't, I can't see anywhere where it actually mentions this presumably a jump start post, and I can't see a negative equivalent either, so not entirely sure how to do a jump start on this. That will be a question for INEOS, I feel. One of my assistants pointed out this really good seal, and I think that's just great. I mean, it will just help the dust coming in, possibly even water, and just provide a little bit of extra sealant, maybe even a little bit of noise control as well. So I really like to see that. Now let's take a look at this bull bar, and not massively impressed, to be honest. I think it's probably the post here is probably a little bit too close to the bodywork for my liking. I like to see a bit more space there, because if it gets bent back you don't want it touching anything, so that's an issue there. There aren't any mounts because I want to see a UHF radio mount here, so you can just pop your UHF straight on, or potentially driving lights or something else, and there's nothing. And sound flag, and I'll show you my car in a moment. I've got a TJM bar and it's got those mounts built in. On Trialmasters at the back there's a built-in towbar, and as you can see they're electrics, but that's NATO standard electrics for some reason, so you do need to get them swapped to Australian, which isn't a big deal, or use an adapter. There's also this sticker which implies that the GVM is 3500 and the towbar mass is 237. I checked with INEOS and they said no, that's wrong, should be 3550 and 350. The Grenadier has a standard tyre pressure monitoring system, which is fantastic. There's no protection around the valve, as you can see. The pressure can, however, be changed for off-road use, but it cannot be extended for a trailer. Now, many people will be wanting to fit taller tyres, and Kenyan Grenadier on YouTube has a video showing 285/70/17, which is a bit under 33 inches. Note, however, that he has fitted different wheels. Those are black Rhino wheels, and for Australian users you'll find that has resulted in a poke, which would be illegal in Australia. It might be legal in Africa where he is. You may be able to get away without that poke though. Now it does have a reversing camera which is tucked up out of the way. It's not actually central, which when I've used these sort of things in the past I found it a little bit annoying when you're trying to line up a trailer. It's good just to have it exactly over the tow board and you can get it exactly lined up. Okay, so a couple of points on the reversing camera. First of all, it could be a lot bigger when you are in reverse. I'll actually put it into reverse and see. The car's in reverse now. I'd like that just to become larger because you probably don't need to look at your field or your gear or anything else, use up more screen. And you can see what I mean by it being offset relative to the tow ball. You'd really want that directly over the tow ball. Now if I turn the steering wheel, yeah, those lines do actually turn a bit. So we've got a rear mounted spare, which is good because then that's easily accessible and it doesn't take up space underneath the vehicle. Now the door is a split, and for some reason you open the smaller door first. I don't know why you'd ever want to really open the smaller door only, but then you reach around and you pull that and then the second door opens. Now, I actually like the second split because sometimes off-road you don't want a massive great door. It's good to have the two options there, but I preferred that door to open first, then that one, but it's not a massive deal. Also good, they open more than 90 degrees, so you can go straight in there. It's not like, you know, they're like that and this, and it's restricting what you can do. It's actually wide open. Now, the other thing is, yeah, okay, there's no latch there that I can see, unless that rotates or anything, to stop it. So if you're on a hill, you don't want that coming in and crushing you. We'll test that in a bit. Now, let's get the tape measure out and see. So that's 800 mil, which is okay-ish. If I go from here, probably a bit more like 900, so that's okay. It's not outstanding. What I do like is these tie-down points. They're really good. I'm now going to take forever to put this one back on camera. It's going to be embarrassing, but anyway, let's give it a shot. There we go. So that's really good to have those, and they're flush, and there's no stupid carpet either, which is fantastic. There's a 12 volt over here, and there's more tie-down points here. There's a cargo barrier here, which is great. You could potentially put some stuff there, and for those of you that got kids, 3 tether points here, and they're right in the back of the seat, which is great, built in, and they could obviously be used for non-kid purposes as well. So now you could also, I guess, kind of sit in it from here. There's a decent bit of space here, not a load point there. So yeah, overall I like this, and I would imagine that someone would create a gull wing window for it so you can just get extra storage, and it's all fairly sensible. Wouldn't have minded this being a little bit flatter, but one of the best interiors that I've seen for a while, I think, for four-wheel driving. Now there's one light here which, bit of a missed opportunity. I'd have liked to have seen a light here and a light here and one at the end, because when you're in a dark, wet environment, you're four-wheel driving, this single light at the back isn't going to cut it. Built into the rear door is a small compartment which houses a handy first aid kit, and INEOS also sell a drop-down table, which is a really handy accessory that many four-wheel drivers add to their vehicles aftermarket anyway. Now, one point on the raised air intake, which remember is not sealed, therefore it's a snorkel, and it's maybe a bit less sealed than we thought because there's these light attachments in it, and an owner has sent me images of the light attachment literally bouncing out just going along the road, and obviously that would be pretty bad if that happened in a water crossing situation. So I would definitely be looking to pop these out and give them a decent Sikaflexing before you go off-road. Okay, so lights. Now there's no protection here. What I wouldn't mind seeing is just a thin aluminium, even something to protect it, because if you reverse into a tree or whatever else there, you don't want to smash that to pieces, so that's a bit unprotected. I'm sure you've all seen these really clever utility rails. Big fan, never had them on a car, but it's one of those things that you didn't know you needed in your life till you see it, so that's a top idea. Same sort of roof rail thing up here as well. What's really good, look at that electrical connector, little connector there, so you can get electrical stuff right up onto the roof rack, so that is really, really good. Love to see that sort of thing. Then down here we've got, these are not rock sliders. Obviously you wouldn't want to do any form of off-roading with that. They'd be smashed to pieces in about 15 seconds flat, so we're going to have to take care of them today, but yeah, I'd go for the rock slider option for sure. That would be better. So it's really important to use all of the storage space you can in a four-wheel drive, and one of the things I always like to do is look for under-seat storage, and there actually is some. You can see here, here's the toolkit, and this is actually the wheel brace and a few more things, so nice little compartment there. What I would do if it was my car is I'd put a bit of rubber or something across this just to stop stuff sliding out, because inevitably it will slide out and you don't want that, but I like the fact that there's a compartment there. Now if we get actually inside the vehicle, we've got a pretty small glove compartment here, a little bit disappointing in terms of that size, it's not very big. We've got a Jesus handle here, which is good. Flat area here, I like that. So, you know, you can put one or two things up there. You could put a map or a coffee cup, not when you're moving, but that would be good. And, you know, I wouldn't even mind a bit of a raised area here, so you could sort of put a few things inside of it during the coffee break. But this is a nice, good area, which is flat. And it's kind of those little things which, to me, start to set the Grenadier apart. The fact that you can use it as a flat area here and make it a bit more utilitarian than the average four-wheel drive. All right, so we've got our tie-down points for the roof here, but also that could be for an awning or whatever else. It's just handy to have these. I do like the fact that they're there. And then we've got these slat things here, which I'm told by the owner are in fact somewhat load-bearing. They're obviously not going to replace a complete roof rack, but you could put something up here and it wouldn't be touching the bare metal or the metal of the roof itself. So again, another really nice touch, I feel. And here's the fuel tank. You just press that, and then there's your diesel, and there's your AdBlue. Okay, so seats, 3 in the back. Now these pull up like so, and they then reveal the battery compartment like that. And there's fuses here, which is fantastic, but what I'm missing is what the fuses actually are. So why isn't there a diagram here or somewhere to show me what these fuses are? I do not want to have to look in the owner's manual, which may be lost or whatever else, and start trying to randomly pull fusing. In order to get to the batteries, I think you're going to need to take this entire apparatus out, and of course they're Torx screws. I don't really get why they're Torx. Why wouldn't you just have a normal bolt in there as opposed to a Torx? Because you're not necessarily going to have one of those to hand in the bush, but you're almost certainly going to have a socket set or a shifter or whatever else. So disappointed to see the use of the bolts there. All right, let's put that down and see how we go. Now, so we've got to pop these out. Okay, so then we get rid of that, and then that becomes a flattish area. Now that's quite good from a load perspective because it's flat, and then you can obviously use that as a tie down. It doesn't lock down as far as I can see. I'd have liked to have seen that locking down, and it doesn't. I would also really have liked to have seen a completely flat load space. Now, the best vehicle for that was the Land Rover Discovery 3 and Discovery 4. The seating arrangement in that was just absolutely perfect. And I've never seen a vehicle rival it since. But this is not too bad once we put that up, and then that can come back like, oops, we've got to pull these up. Make sure that they are, there we go. That comes in like that. A little bit awkward, but we'll make, there we go. There we go. Now if I crawl up here, then that comes forwards like so. Okay, that one presumably will actually also fold flat, so let's just pull that out, and that won't actually come out unless I pull it forward. So now I've pulled it forwards, now that's out, now that comes up, and that goes down. And yeah, again, that's not quite flat. Wouldn't mind it being completely flat, but yeah, anyway, is what it is. Now let's talk about seating. So if I sit here, I'm 6 feet tall, and I've kind of got enough leg room, I feel. Seats feel fairly comfortable, but I think it's got the old Defender problem, which is I'm basically looking at this area here. You have to just lean forwards like that. So if you're shorter, it's going to work, but I'm not overly keen on sort of having to do that to look out. The controls then, so first of all, huge props to INEOS for just using a lot of physical touch controls. I think that's really good. We certainly don't want everything controlled off a touchscreen menu off-road, because gloved fingers, cold fingers, and then accidentally pressing the wrong thing, it's crazy. You can just see what things are there, which I think is absolutely fantastic. Now, there are a lot of controls up here, and here's where I start to have a bit of a problem, because from the driver's seat I can't actually read the writing or really see the icons all that well, and so I'm going to have to sort of do that in order to take a look at them and go, okay, well, is that the left or the right locker? I can't really see it from here. I'd want controls which I'm going to use on the move in high pressure situations, such as the lockers down here somewhere. So that switchgear then, yes, it's fantastic that it's all buttons and dials and levers, but what INEOS say is that it is aviation inspired overhead controls, which is okay, designed to keep off-road switchgear out of the way. Absolutely not. I want my off-road switchgear where I can get to it. I don't want to have to look up in the ceiling for something which should be easily accessible in my eye line round about on this control panel here. So I've done a little bit of research, asked a military test pilot, a supporter of mine, he gave me some information, I looked around, and yeah, the correct way to design this stuff is to put the most frequently used controls in the operator's line of sight. So with that, let's do a little bit of redesign. I'm going to take the heated seat control, put that up in the roof, put the stability control there instead. The hill descent control is going to go here instead of in the roof. We're going to remove that other seating heat control and put that in the roof. The window heating, again, that goes into the roof, and we're going to put the lockers here because that is something you absolutely do need when you're out on the tracks, and we're going to label them cross-axle lockers to differentiate them clearly between the centre diff lock, which is important. And the wading and off-road buttons can go here, and in place the start-stop button up in the roof. Now over here it's got a height and width, but I think we'd want stickers on that, because when you put bigger tyres, the suspension lift on the roof rack, those numbers are going to change. So cute, but we need replacement stickers. Alright, so let's go to off-road mode and see what we've got. So we've got wheel angle here, and if I turn the steering wheel, that's basically the steering wheel angle, which is going to be really handy for driver training and other things. Attitude, so that's your roll and your pitch sensors there, which is handy. G-force, not really handy. Altitude, that should actually be elevation, not altitude, but who's being picky? Me, obviously. Now this is good. We've got tyre temperatures there, which is great. Engine, gearbox, transfer case as well, and kilopascals. I wonder if there's a way to change that to PSI. Hopefully there would be, otherwise you're going to have to do that translation again, which is annoying. Pathfinder, I think this is hopefully this will export in GPX files or something else like that. I think it's a GPS recording system. So we can see that it's charging, which is great. State of charge, 14.5 volts, battery temperature, good information. I like this. This is actually useful. It's a good thing. And latitude, longitude. Now, again, I'll be interested to see if we can change that to UTM or degrees decimal minutes instead of just decimal degrees as we have here. Maybe I'm asking a little bit too much, and the usual trip information stuff down the bottom. And this chart here, this is the elevation over time. So that's the kilometres you travelled, and there's the elevation. You can see we're at 300 metres, just over 300 metres elevation at the moment, and we've dropped down, etc. So you can see a little, oh, actually, we can press that. Ah, hey, that's actually cool. So we can press this at any point, and it tells us we can actually scroll along. That's nice. So on that current trip, we can go back to any point and say, hey, where is that highest point? You can read off the lat and long and elevation, not the altitude. Altitude's how far you are above the ground, not above sea level. That's actually pretty cool. Okay, another nice little feature. Remaining distance. That's good. Oh, engine hours. Excellent. That's such a good touch to have engine hours on there. We're going to do a glove test. Here's my hand. Here's my gloves. Can I? Yep, kind of works with gloves. Come on. Yep, I'd say that's a win. So I don't have to actually tested it with gloves, but seems to work okay. So this button here controls all of those options, and then you can just press it down to select something like that, and that means you don't actually need to use the touch screen. You can simply use the button here, so that rotates, and you can rock it from side to side, and you press it down to select things up here. So you don't even need to use the touch screen for all of this stuff, and I think that's very handy. Then there's shortcut, so you can press the off-road button here, so that brings us off-road button. We can press the menu, we can go straight to there, we can go to audio, favourites, etc. So handy use of the rocker button, I feel. So I really enjoy driving this vehicle. It reminds me of the Mercedes-Benz G-Class when I first got in that. Instantly I felt, yeah, this is good. I think this dash works pretty well with the extra sort of minor dash over there, a bit quirky, but I don't think that's a bad thing at all. Maybe a little bit complicated at times there, like a few more setup options. Visibility is fantastic, that feels great. We're doing 100 k's an hour at the moment and it's not really that noisy. We do have the BFG all-terrains on, so I'm going to make a bit of an allowance for that. The ride, not too bad. The steering, it's a little bit slow and a little bit indistinct, but I see no reason why it couldn't be punted on through corners with reasonable speed. Certainly there's the power there, it's got all-wheel drive grip as well. The feel of the steering wheel, it's chunky so you can kind of grip it properly, it doesn't feel plasticky at all. That's great. Visibility out the back window is pretty poor, but to be honest I never really used the interior mirror anyway because the car's normally completely loaded, so who cares what the visibility at the back is like. Wing mirrors are more important. They're pretty big, set a little bit low, and I actually like that because then you can see over the top of them. In some cars the wing mirrors are up here and that just blocks your visibility. Here they're relatively low, which I think is a good thing, and they're also quite wide as well, which I think is definitely another bonus. Now, as far as ride is concerned, it's reasonably comfortable for a live axle vehicle. Again, it's got those light truck construction all-terrain tyres, which are not going to be the smoothest riding on the road. Certainly zero complaints, and at 100 k's an hour, 90 k's an hour, even in the wet, sounds really not a problem. It's not obviously not going to be a Range Rover like refined cruiser, but you could easily eat up the miles in this car, I feel, without any problem at all. But I don't like the footrest. Don't like it. It's forcing my knee to bend too much, and I want to be able to stretch that leg, and I can't really stretch it unless I somehow put it underneath the brake pedal. I don't want to be doing that, so definitely not a fan of that step we've got there on the left. Would it be a deal breaker for me? I don't know. Be pretty close to one, I think, but everyone's got their own view on these things. Now let's talk about range, which is a big problem for Australian users, and I've put the Grenadier up against a few of its competitors here. What I've done is I've taken the standard fuel consumption figure, I've added 25% to it and allowed a 100 kilometre reserve range, and that brings us out, as you can see, 568 kilometres range for the Grenadier, which is the least of all those vehicles, and I've put them in the graph over here. So why is the Grenadier show relatively short range? Well, there's three reasons for it. The first is that it's actually got relatively high base fuel consumption. It's 10.5 litres to the 100 on the combined cycle, which is nearly as much as the ancient LC76 with a much older engine and a 5-speed manual that is revving its crazy over at 100 kilometres an hour. Yet this has got an 8-speed modern ZF Auto. Why? Well, it's heavy is one point, but so's some of the other cars here. So weight is definitely one factor. The other factor is that lovely boxy shape that it's got, a very practical shape, which is great and I love it, but it's just not aerodynamically efficient. But I'd rather have the boxy shape. Regardless, we've got a high fuel consumption for the Grenadier, and then the fuel tank isn't massive. It's not tiny. It's 90 litres compared to the Everest V6. Remember, the V6 drinks more than the 2-litre bi-turbo, but you can see, despite having 10 extra litres, because the Everest V6 fuel consumption is much lower, it can actually go further. So you've got your high fuel consumption, fuel tank not massive, and then there's currently no long range tank options, although I know that our companies are looking at it and hopefully they'll be able to squeeze a few more litres out. So range is not great on the Grenadier, and that's not just for long distance desert crossings. For example, I went into the Victorian High Country for 4 days over Easter, camping every day, and we used just under 100 litres of diesel doing that, and had that been a Grenadier, I couldn't have done that trip without taking a jerry can, and I hate jerry cans in the back of my car. Now, related to that, the high flow diesel nozzle issue, the Grenadier does not take a high flow nozzle, and I think this is a really good example of niche users versus economics. For whatever reason, they didn't design it with a high flow nozzle to begin with, but once they have realised it's going to be basically too expensive to change it. And what I'm going to say here is that the boss of INEOS Asia Pacific, Justin Hovercar, got on Facebook and actually gave this fantastic response, which I put here. So that to me is a massive win for INEOS owners and the way car companies should interact there. The solution is carry an adapter, which you can get, or decant into jerry cans and then pour the jerry cans in. Not ideal at all. Is it a deal breaker? Well, it depends how much time you're going to spend in areas which only have high flow diesel, really. Now, aftermarket support is really important for any touring four-wheel drive, and I've talked to 3 of the largest companies in the aftermarket in Australia, and they all have the same response, which is no plans, busy with other projects, need to see what's happening there. The amount of money it takes to get a car and then develop accessories for it is huge, and there's so many other new cars at the moment of which there's going to be a lot of accessory demand, and therefore the Grenadier it's a new quantity. They don't know how many it's going to sell, so they're not going to invest in it, but obviously that will change if there's a lot of demand. And INEOS, of course, have all of those really good accessories, OEM, which is great, and I think that's a real positive, but it does actually decrease the incentive for these guys to develop anything. Now, that said, there are quite a few companies which are developing products for the Grenadier, and I expect that to increase. Good places to find them: go to the ineosforum.com. Yeah, remember, it's not just Facebook, there's Facebook groups for the Grenadier, but also a good web forum as well, and there's even now a podcast as well. All right, now let's take a look at cost effectiveness. A lot of people have bought the Grenadier maybe not worrying too much about cost. I just want one, I'm just going to buy one. Well, that's not the average consumer. So there's 3 grades of Grenadier. You've got the base Grenadier, 110,000 plus on roads, doesn't even have power windows. What most people are buying is the Trialmaster, which has the cross-axle differential locks, the raised air intake, ladder at the back, and basically a lot of stuff you'd probably add on to the Grenadier anyway. And the Fieldmaster, which has 18-inch alloy wheels, and I'm just going to leave it there because I don't actually see the point of this grade at all, but it exists, so I'll put it up on the screen. So let's take a look at what that looks like compared to some of its competitors. So we've got the Isuzu MUX, 67,000 base, and I put base prices here just for comparison. The Y63 Patrol, Defender, and the Ford Everest. So these are all base four-wheel drive models, and we compare that to the Grenadier, and you can see it's more expensive than the 300 series. And when you're saying it's more expensive than the 300 series, then you're talking expensive. Now, we should also say that this comes with decent tyres and recovery points front and rear. These vehicles typically don't. So again, when you're comparing prices, you've got to look at what you actually get as opposed to just the sticker price. But even so, that is expensive. So why would you spend the money on the Grenadier over these cars? Well, I think that there's 2 reasons really. Touring and work design. So everything I've talked about in this video, it's a very, very practical design. It's got a boxy boot, it's got the utilitarian rails, etc. All of those things go into making it a great off-road touring vehicle. And the factory accessories, you can just tick a lot of factory accessories, they're just there for you. That said, Ford have done the same thing with ARB for the Everest, so that advantage is negated as far as the Ford vehicles are concerned. So those are the reasons for the Grenadier. Now, why do you buy these vehicles? Well, the first thing is price. I mean, we could take an Everest and you could throw $30,000 worth of accessories and build yourself an amazing touring vehicle, which would do the Canning, it would do the Simpson, it would run around the high country day in, day out, it would go anywhere you want to go, and you'd still be well underneath the cost of a Grenadier, and you would get 5-star safety, and you would get luxury, and you'd get advanced driver assistance. So, you know, it kind of makes it hard to, you can't justify a Grenadier on practical terms. It's not like it's got a payload which blows all of these cars into the water. It's not like it can go anywhere where these cars can't go with mods. You're going to buy one of these because you just like it, really. All right, now let's talk about spares and supports, because a lot of people are saying, oh, INEOS is a new company and there's not going to be any spares for it, and you know, I've got a Toyota and that's going to be fine. Well, the fact of the matter, if you've got a new GR300 Sport, your average outback mechanic is not going to have parts for that lying on his workbench. And you know, this isn't 20, 30 years ago. Now there's trucks running all over Australia, even to pretty remote areas. There's services which are pulling four-wheel drives out of Simpson Desert areas, things like that. There's recovery systems. You know, if you've got a problem, you can get a car to a capital city much easier than ever before. There's even insurance to cover it now, and also cars are more reliable as well, and every indication seems that INEOS are going to do pretty well on this. And I've just put this, not a Grenadier obviously, this is a Chinese four-wheel drive I drove across the Simpson, stock standard, to prove that you actually don't need a Toyota to go into the outback or travel. So I wouldn't put too much stock from Old Mate 58 going on and on and on about spares and support for INEOS. All right, so let's summarise then. So what's good about the Grenadier from a touring perspective? Well, the first thing is showroom off-road touring. So just out of the box, turn the key, you know, it's designed for the job, which is great. You don't need to do anything to it really. Tyres, recovery points come standard, so there's some kit you don't get. There's a whole heap of standard accessories. They're crash tested, albeit there's no ANCAP rating. They're warranted, etc. It's all integrated. There's a petrol version if you want that, very rare these days, two-seater version, which is good. That boxy boot, it's not as big as it should be, but it's good. All of those storage areas, the utility belts, the cubby wheel on the back of the spare wheel, the tie downs, it's just all goodness. The flat surfaces you can put things on, the bonnet, the inside, that's great. The auxiliary wiring, it's all there. I'm hearing that auto electricians are loving the Grenadier to work on. Again, that's got to be a bonus. Cheaper, easier to fix, to install stuff. The information screens, there's a lot of information. It's actually useful. It's got a track logger. Got to tick that as well. You know, you don't need to rely on the touchscreen. Great, that's fantastic. The weights are pretty good. I've gone into detail on the weights on another video, but the roof load, the towing, the rear axle load are all pretty good. Only the front axle load is a little bit low, and the payload should have been higher. And it is seen to be very strongly built as well. A lot of good quality components in there. So a lot of reasons to love the Grenadier. On the negative, we got to start with the cost. I've just covered that. It's just an expensive vehicle. And I said the thing which would have got me saying, yeah, buy it, is a payload of 1100 kilograms, but it's nowhere near that. Payload, we just covered that. 5-star safety. You're not going to get that rating there. You're not going to get all the advanced driver assistance. Some people hate them, but they're genuinely useful now, particularly in the later revisions. The range is a problem. Fuel consumption is slightly too high as well. The fuel filler doesn't take high flow. The boot is, I feel, is a bit short. It's a lovely boot. It's just for the class of vehicle it is, it should have been 100 millimeters longer, and I feel that it wouldn't really have compromised anything and just allowed us to fit more in the back there. Major player aftermarket support is lacking at the moment, so getting a replacement bar or winch or suspension may be an issue. The second row should fold flat. It doesn't. The PCD on the wheels, not a common PCD. I'd prefer it to follow the Ranger. I don't really see why they had to make a special one for it. Progressive springs. So that basically means that the springs compress quite quickly for a soft ride when the vehicle is unloaded, and then they get harder. No good for Australia, because we tend to just load 150 kilograms worth of gear into our truck as is and then get in it ourselves. So you kind of just want fixed rate springs just to deal with that load. Otherwise, you've just taken up all of that nice soft bit initially. So I'm just not a massive fan of the progressive springs. And the footrest, you need to look at that yourself. Don't buy the car without doing the investigation. I'm not going to say whether it's a deal breaker or not. You need to decide that. I think it probably would be for me though. So I think that the Grenadier is probably the best touring based on the market, certainly off the showroom floor. I don't think anything can really match its design, its robustness, its practicality, and all of its accessories. On the other hand, you can just buy a normal wagon. You can just buy any of those wagons there. You can throw 30, even 40, sometimes $50,000 worth of accessories for it, and the Grenadier is not going to go anywhere you can't follow, and you'll have all of those accessories and it'll all be built exactly the way you want. And you've got to look at that, and you've got the safety factor as well. So I hope you found this video useful. If you've got any questions, please drop them in the comments, and thank you for watching.